Tonight, chilling crash landing video surfaces from the disaster at Toronto's Pearson Airport. The new questions about the investigation.
Well, they just drove it into the runway.
The remarkable stories of survival.
I just remember being fully sideways and I was looking down and just seeing like sparks and flames.
With a string of aviation disasters putting flight safety under the microscope. What's fueling inflation in Canada? The new economic snapshot and the new tariff Donald Trump is threatening on vehicles. The outcome of critical peace talks between Moscow and Washington over the war in Ukraine, why Kyiv wasn't at the table. Plus, mounting concerns over the Pope's deteriorating health. And a hockey hero at the Four Nations face-off.
He is Captain Canada. He's probably the best player to ever wear the Canadian jersey.
The growing legend of Sidney Crosby.
What a play by Sidney Crosby!
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening. Terrifying new video is emerging from the crash landing of Delta Flight 4819 at Toronto's Pearson Airport. This view, taken from another plane, shows the final seconds before the jet touched down and that erupted into a massive fireball on the runway. And this, the chaos from inside the cabin. People hanging from their seats. We'll bring you the story of the man who shot these images in just a moment. But we begin with CTV's Heather Wright with what investigators are hoping to learn from the cockpit voice and data recorders now recovered and the update on the 21 people injured.
Harrowing video shows the moment Delta Flight 4819 touches down at Toronto's Pearson Airport, providing new clues into the Monday crash.
The airplane seems to be descending very rapidly. The airplane banks slightly to the right, and then the right landing gear touches down, and I think that's where the right wing broke off.
As the plane skids along the runway, there's a burst of flames with black smoke billowing from the aircraft, which then flips onto its back and comes to a stop. Inside, passengers can be seen hanging from their seats. Come on! Before being ushered out of the upside-down plane. All 76 passengers and 4 crew members aboard the plane managed to escape.
The crew of Delta Flight 4819 heroically led passengers to safety, evacuating a jet that had overturned on the runway on landing that was amidst smoke and fire.
A total of 21 people were taken to hospital, their injuries ranging from mild to critical. 19 have since been released. The plane was attempting to land during high winds and drifting snow. And while it's still not clear what caused the crash, some experts say the descent initially looked normal, but there was no flare before the landing. A maneuver where pilots gently pitch the plane's nose upward, which slows the aircraft.
Very last moment there, it appears that the aircraft simply did not flare at all. They just drove it into the runway.
Investigators from the Transportation Safety Board, the U.S. FAA, and other agencies are on site.
We've already removed the cockpit voice recorder
as the investigation gets underway. The airplane will remain on the runway for the next 48 hours or so as investigators continue their work, which also means that 2 runways here at Toronto's Pearson Airport will also remain closed. Omar.
Heather Wright outside Pearson Airport tonight. We are hearing some heart-wrenching stories of survival tonight from those who escaped the Delta Airlines plane. Here's CTV's John Venavelli-Rao.
Everything, drop it! In those frantic moments after that Delta flight flipped over on a runway, Peter Kukoff grabbed his phone and started filming. Initially dangling by their seatbelts, he said the passengers were hanging upside down like bats.
They announced not to get out of their seats, so people were hanging there for, I can't remember how long, but just about a minute, and then they were like, okay, like, get down.
Kukoff says he didn't notice anything wrong on the flight until the moment they hit the ground.
Oh. And then all of a sudden, I just remember being fully sideways, and I was looking down and just seeing like sparks and flames and whatever was grinding against the ground, and then it happened pretty dang quick.
Passenger Ashley Zook also filmed herself overturned, later expressing disbelief at what happened.
I was just in a plane crash. Oh my God.
It's a really miracle.
Father Joel Bernales is a Catholic priest. He believes only by the grace of God did all 80 on board survive. Amazed he was not hurt.
No physical bruise, no physical scratch, no physical pain or muscle pain.
Passengers say the flight attendants remained remarkably calm, and the flight crew hailed as heroes.
We all worked together and got out of there as quickly as we could because we could smell fuel as we were getting out of the plane.
Some of those on board now making their way home. One injured man we spoke with who was released from hospital, his company sent a private jet to take him back to Minneapolis. Passengers feeling so very fortunate to have walked away from this. John Venevali-Rouse, CTV News, Toronto.
Incredible stories. Several plane-related tragedies in the past month are stoking fears of flying in some passengers. CTV's Alex Karpa separates the reality of the risks.
4 U.S. airline disasters in 3 weeks, and now the 5th at Toronto's Pearson Airport has passengers on edge.
Definitely that does not motivate me to fly.
Oh my God.
Miroslava Patches has had a lifelong fear of flying.
It's the stress and it's the fear of unknown, and fear not to be understood, fear of to make mistake, to miss the plane.
In spite of recent fatal crashes that claimed 85 lives, there isn't necessarily a correlation.
I don't see any connection between these four. It's certainly something to look at.
The Trump administration fired hundreds of FAA employees, including safety workers, highlighting major airline staffing shortages in the U.S. As for how confident passengers feel about flying,
Of course, a little bit fear every time when I fly on a plane.
Now it's maybe safer because everyone will be more cautious and careful.
I think it's safe enough.
There's been a couple recent events, but I think overall my flying experience on the safety side was pretty good.
Experts say there can be a significant psychological impact to seeing so many incidents in such a short period of time.
Watching things like that are definitely very traumatizing, very frightening. I think, anytime we experience a sense of trauma, it reduces our sense of safety in the world.
Fatal and non-fatal commercial airline accidents are highly unlikely, especially here in Canada. A recent airline safety study published back in the summer found that between 2018 and 2022, the worldwide death risk per boarding was 1 in 13.7 million. Alex Karpa, CTV News, Winnipeg.
And from planes to trains, significant rail delays on the Ottawa-Montreal-Toronto corridor following a CN derailment in Dorval, Quebec. This was the scene in Montreal via rail passengers stuck waiting for hours. It comes after several weather-related delays over the past couple of days. Montreal police found an unconscious 57-year-old man inside a snow-covered car with the engine still running. He was transported to hospital in critical condition but was later pronounced dead. Police say the cause of death is unclear, and the coroner's office is now investigating. Enormous mounds of snow in that city caused delays all morning. And in Ottawa, the sidewalks weren't even visible after back-to-back storms dumped nearly 70 centimeters of snow in the capital. Much of the country continues to be in the grips of a punishing winter. On Vancouver Island, there are warnings of heavy wind gusts, while a prolonged deep freeze will linger in the prairies for the next few days, with wind chills in the -40s. In Ontario, snow squalls are in the forecast, and a winter storm warning tomorrow afternoon could bring up to 25 centimeters of snow to parts of Nova Scotia.
All you can do is look at it and think, what in the world are we going to do?
And in the U.S., 14 people are now dead after major flooding across Kentucky. Rescue crews are still searching for survivors. The storm is now moving west, bringing heavy snow to Kansas and as far south as Texas. Back here at home, the latest economic snapshot shows the cost of living ticked up last month, but remained below the Bank of Canada's target. Still, it could decrease the odds of another rate cut next month. CTV's Sarah Plowman on what drove inflation up.
It's not hard to find somebody feeling squeezed by gas prices.
Always, they are high, but along with all the other prices for the car.
When you add that in food prices too, it's quite expensive.
The price of the pump jumped 8.6% across Canada compared to last January, largely thanks to a huge spike in Manitoba when it brought back its provincial gas tax. Energy was the biggest mover of inflation last month.
It's January in Canada. That's what happens. Everybody reaches for the thermostat.
Annual inflation rose 1.9%, up from a 1.8% bump in December, the first acceleration of inflation in 3 months. The price of vehicles went up too. Restaurant bills went down, so did the cost of alcohol and toys. Purchases part of the 2-month GST tax break that ended this weekend.
The thing about the GST holiday, it's probably distorting some of the data we're getting from StatScan right now.
So it probably held inflation down. People did shift some of their spending to the goods that were GST exempt.
The Bank of Canada cut its key interest rate to 3% in January. With a low loonie and talk of U.S. tariffs and a Canadian counterpunch, there's uncertainty about what's next.
A broad-based tariff applied across the board, that would have a significant impact, I think, on lowering the value of our currency even further and adding to inflationary pressures that way.
The Bank of Canada will announce its next rate decision on March 12th, the same day U.S. President Donald Trump is set to slap a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Fredericton.
And as Sarah mentioned, there's growing anxiety about what to expect from south of the border. And today, U.S. President Donald Trump revealed how he will tariff imported cars.
It'll be in the neighborhood of 25%.
Trump said those levies could come as early as April 2nd. The trade pact between Canada, the United States, and Mexico protects vehicles from U.S. tariffs, but that pact is up for review next year. Steep tariffs on a highly integrated North American auto sector could have devastating consequences. How to deal with U.S. tariffs, a central feature of the Liberal leadership race, and now new numbers reveal which candidate has raised the most in the race to replace Justin Trudeau. Mark Carney has brought in $1.9 million in donations, according to Elections Canada data. Chrystia Freeland, widely seen as Carney's main rival, has pulled in more than $226,000. But Freeland's campaign is disputing that figure, claiming to have raised more than $600,000. U.S. President Donald Trump delivered one of his sharpest critiques yet of Ukraine tonight, blaming that country for starting the war, which actually began with Russia's invasion. Those comments coming 3 years into the war and hours after Washington kick-started peace talks with Moscow, snubbing Kyiv. Here's CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malvin.
Russia continues to attack Ukraine, even as top diplomats from Washington and Moscow met face-to-face in a Saudi Arabian palace to begin to find a way to end this war. It will be 3 years next week since Russia invaded its neighbor, pounding Ukraine, seizing territory, and destroying thousands of lives.
There has to be concessions made by all sides. We're not going to predetermine what those are. We're certainly not going to negotiate this today.
Notably absent from these high-stakes talks, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, who angrily said, "No one decides anything behind our backs." President Donald Trump, who kick-started these talks, bashed Zelensky and falsely blamed Ukraine for starting the war.
I think I have the power to end this war, and I think it's going very well. But today I heard, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
Even questioning where the money the U.S. has given Kyiv has gone. For Russia's Vladimir Putin, this is already a win. Reestablishing diplomatic relations with Washington puts Russia back on the world stage. The Kremlin laying down markers, rejecting peacekeeping forces from NATO countries in Ukraine under any peace deal, calling it unacceptable. But Trump seemed open to the idea.
If they want to do that, that's great. I'm all for it.
Washington and Moscow agreeing to create teams to support Ukraine peace talks, restore staffing at U.S. and Russian embassies, and explore closer relations and economic opportunities.
No one else has been able to bring something together like what we saw today because Donald Trump is the only leader in the world that can.
Pressing ahead with a peace deal as soon as possible, Trump says he hopes to meet with Putin by the end of the month. Joy Malvin, CTV News, Washington.
Coming up.
I think it's a very difficult moment now for the Pope.
What we know about the Pope's health diagnosis. Concerns over the health of the Pope have mounted tonight after doctors said he has pneumonia in both his lungs. The leader of 1.3 billion Catholics worldwide is spending his 5th straight night in hospital. CTV's Genevieve Beauchemin on the diagnosis.
Dios te salve Maria.
In a late evening announcement in Italy, the Vatican said the Pope's health had worsened, prompting concern among the faithful gathered at the hospital. Doctors said he had the onset of pneumonia in both lungs. This after describing test results as painting a complex clinical picture.
I think it's a very difficult moment now for the Pope, but he's in good humor. He's praying, he's reading. That's what they tell us.
The Vatican canceled all papal audiences through the weekend, as well as a mass for deacons scheduled for Sunday.
Yeah, we hope he will get better soon and recover. Yeah, I don't know how is the situation, but yesterday we were reading in the newspaper that the situation is not so good.
I wish for him for a speedy recovery and that he will have many strong years left in him.
This is the Pope's 5th night in hospital. On Monday, staff determined he was suffering from a polymicrobial respiratory tract infection, a mix of virus and bacteria, and he began a new course of drugs. Infectious diseases experts say treatment is trickier for elderly patients, such as the Pope, who is 88 years old.
Polymicrobica.
It will take a few days before we see the effects of therapy, said Dr. Carmelo De Cero. News of the Pope's ill health comes as Jubilee celebrations are underway for the Catholic Church, a year where millions are expected to make a pilgrimage to the Vatican. The Vatican put out word that the Pope wanted to thank his well-wishers and asked them to pray for him. Genevieve Beauchemin, CTV News.
A small Alberta town is in shock after a 14-day-old baby was mauled by the family dog and later died. The RCMP says the boy was flown by air ambulance from Entwistle to the Children's Hospital in Edmonton.
Every time we've had to go to a situation where this is the case, it's quite difficult for everybody involved beyond just the parents and the family.
The medium-sized dog will be examined by a vet and could be euthanized depending on the results of that report. Still ahead, striking out on a new deal.
I don't want, especially my teammates, to go through any distractions.
What's next for the Blue Jays' star slugger? A federal judge in Washington has refused to request to block Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency from accessing sensitive U.S. government records. The decision is a blow to a group of 14 Democratic state attorneys general who are trying to halt the Trump administration from reshaping the U.S. federal bureaucracy. The judge found that there are legitimate questions about Musk's authority, but said there isn't enough evidence to justify a restraining order. Grammy-nominated rapper A$AP Rocky has been acquitted of firing a gun at a former friend.
Not guilty.
The musician was accused of shooting his former bandmate in 2021. He was treated for minor injuries. At the center of this case was whether Rocky fired real bullets or blanks. The defense argued he used a prop gun from the sets of a music video featuring his longtime partner, Rihanna. Well, fans of British artist Banksy and California rock band Blink-182 will soon have a chance to get their hands on a unique masterpiece. A Banksy painting called Crude Oil and owned by band member Mark Hoppus is going up for auction. Sotheby's says it will be sold in 2 weeks in London and is already expected to fetch more than $6 million US, with some of the proceeds going to help victims of the LA wildfires. And a tough start to spring training for the Toronto Blue Jays as all-star slugger Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is set to become a free agent at the end of the upcoming season.
I mean, we never got to that point where I feel like I wanted to do the deal.
The first baseman and the team failed to reach an agreement on an extension before today's deadline on contract negotiations. The 25-year-old insists he would like to stay with the Blue Jays, but says the team didn't offer a dollar amount that made him want to make the deal. Here's how the team's president reacted.
There really aren't degrees of getting it done or not getting it done. It's either a done deal or not a done deal. And so the bottom line result is here. We're disappointed that we couldn't get a deal done.
Now, this doesn't necessarily mean Guerrero is leaving the Blue Jays next fall, but it does give the rest of the league a chance to make their pitch. Still ahead, high hockey hopes.
He is Captain Canada. He's probably the best player to ever wear the Canadian jersey.
Canada looks to Sidney Crosby to bring it on home. From Sid the Kid to Captain Canada, 37-year-old Sidney Crosby, now a veteran hockey superstar, is carrying the hopes and dreams of fans into the Four Nations final against the U.S. on Thursday. CTV's Paul Hollingsworth took a trip to Crosby's hometown of Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia, where he is still the talk of the town.
That was Crosby bouncing it in, and now it's going to be done. What a play by Sidney Crosby.
He is Captain Canada. He's probably the best player to ever wear the Canadian jersey.
At 37, Sidney Crosby seems to be getting better with age. As Canada prepares for Thursday's championship game against the U.S., they are being led by Crosby, who is also the top scorer in the tournament.
That's what you need to win consistently, and we're going to need another great effort here in the next one.
A win over the U.S. would likely set off a nationwide celebration for a team that is riding a fever wave of fan support.
I think we feel like it's our sport, and we're the best at it. We've been the best at it for decades now, and we're not about to relinquish that title.
Crosby's teammates include fellow Nova Scotians Nathan McKinnon and Brad Marchand. 3 players on the same roster from our country's 4th smallest province sparks a surge of hometown pride in this community.
He's just so happy to be playing for Team Canada and putting that jersey on and playing with Nate and playing with Brad and, you know, doing our whole province proud.
It's difficult to put into words the level of affection and appreciation people in Nova Scotia have for Sidney Crosby. Safe to say people around here are cheering for Canada with a high level of national pride. They are cheering for the 3 Nova Scotians on this roster with provincial pride. And they are cheering for Sidney Crosby, Nova Scotia's most famous hockey export, to have another golden moment. Paul Hollingsworth, CTV News, Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia.
Lots to be proud of. That's a snapshot of this Tuesday. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Good night and see you tomorrow.
CTV National News, Canada's #1 newscast. Canada's #1 newscast for excellence in journalism.
We begin tonight with breaking news.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina, winner of the Canadian Screen Award for Best National Newscast. Watch weeknights at 11.